So we are now into, this is my third talk today. The first one was talking about identity in the cloud, working with access control services, how I can use the cloud to make sure that I can log in with different identities. And we built out a simple example of a web application. We're going to port that now into a new scenario. The second talk we did, we talked about using SQL Azure, a relational database as a service in the cloud. And building on top of those two talks, I'm going to make a few assumptions, and we're going to move fairly quickly. But the whole purpose of this talk, the reason why I put it together, was to take a cloud plus game kind of a scenario and make it all work. So how many people have played this game? Rock, paper, ready? 1, 2, come on. 1, 2. Oh, looks like I lost. Looks like I also won, but the challenge of any game is trying to find a scenario that is simple enough, fun enough, and yet allows you to kind of explore some of the examples of how you would go about building something. Obviously, building a rock, paper, scissors game with 27 players all going at once, you'd actually have to break it out into tournaments of 2 people. This talk is to take a look at the rock, paper, scissors, and then to play it out on the Windows Phone. So we want to have a little bit of fun with this. I'm also assuming that we've got some of the scenario pieces already in place. And there's going to be a good amount of code. So we're going to be kind of taking and building on top of the code that we've done already. If I go too far, just let me know. We do have office hours every week. So if you want to download the code after the fact or have questions on how things work, you can always get a hold of me. I've got some business cards up front if you need that. Also, office hours, benkotips.com/office hours is where I'll be hosting that stuff. So you can go out to my site, which is this one down here on the bottom. And if you click on that, it'll take you out to where you can actually go out and download the code for the finished version working of this working version of the project. So let's talk about what we've done so far and where this is kind of coming from. So what we've got is rock, paper, scissors. We've got some simple basic rules. One is that there's only going to be 2 players. Obviously, having a room with 20-some-odd players, kind of hard to emulate in one fell throw. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 players, a human versus the computer. The computer is going to be a service that we're going to write that will run up in the cloud. I want to be able to go out and see how many games I've won, how many I've lost, and I want to see a history of the games that I've been playing. So we want to be able to see our score. We want to be able to go out and work with that. Ultimately, the goal of this talk was to start from an empty slate and just start from a very beginning, basic kind of a thing. When you look at the application flow, where you're kind of describing how a game like this would be written, you've got a number of different screens and points of interaction that would get built for how those end users would come into this. For instance, in a typical Windows kind of an application, I'd have a splash screen that then goes out to do some identity. So when you come into the application, I need you to log in and tell me who you are. Once we have that identity attached to your session in the phone, then we are going to talk to a service then to pull back a list of our games. And once we have a list of games, then we can go through and play individual games, adding more rounds and throws as we go. So the first part is taking a look at the Windows Phone piece and having the identity added to this. So building the website and deploying it out to the cloud. I've already done that. So I've got a site that's out here, and I'll show you what it looks like. If I go out to Visual Studio, where I've got here, I've created this thing called GIDS Demo. GIDS Demo is a basic website. It has a ADO.NET Entity Database that's attached to some tables in the cloud. I've created a service. The service is going to take this data and then put it out there for us. If I was to take a look at this service and say view it in the browser, assuming I'm connected to the internet still and I've got my firewall rules set up correctly, it would go out and then come back and tell me the types of entities that are in the database. So this then would go out and come back and tell me I've got games, game results, and views of games. So that's the core data that I've got. For accounts and players, I didn't go that deep into my simple example, the simple scenario. So what I'm doing is I'm going to save the player as being your name identity that you get from access control services to tell us which games are yours. So that has been added to this cloud project. The cloud project defined down here for GIDS demo has actually been deployed out into Windows Azure. So from the Windows Azure side, what I've got is you have a Windows Azure. I have an account that has a basic set of resources that I can use later on. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have actually logged into this. And then from inside of that, then I can show you the services that are actually set up and running. Some schema for where those tables are being stored. And then all of that has been hosted out into the Windows Azure environment. And if I take a look at the Windows Azure environment, I've got a couple of deployments going right now. But the one that we're interested in is this GIDS site. And if I go out to the GIDS site on Azure and browse to it, this is the game web application or the website for it. Now, one of the things I have on here is orpa.service, and that then is going to go out and deploy out and host that WCF service for me. So this was created with an entity model. It's got the OData endpoint, WCF Data Service. I have the access control services, which is the part that I created for identity for GIDS. And if I take a look at the management piece for this, I've added a relying party application to it for the GIDS WP7 phone site. So what this is where we're actually going to have the access control services, the identity management piece, the service that's going to go out and keep track of that conversation for us. It has a URI that things are running from. The URI, I'm calling it my RPA, my Rock Paper Azure, is the name of the application that's running inside of this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use just a simple basic, simple web token created for this because I want to work on the phone and I don't need to have the SAML. I've got kind of a lightweight, easy to work with protocol here. And so I've gone out and I've created a set of rules for this that are going to tie into the same thing that we did with the rule groups. So I've got rules that are going out saying pull in the username, the password, or username, email, and the name identifier into the output claims that come from ACS. So with this stuff set up, and with that as our starting point, we've got the website. We'll add a Windows Phone Silverlight application, and then we're going to use NuGet to actually do the adding of identity to that phone application for us. So I've mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last talk, but if I'm working with ACS and I want to use it on a variety of different devices, there's toolkits that are available from the Windows Azure team. One for Windows Phone, one for iOS, one for Android, another one for Windows 8, which I'll talk about in the last session of today. But we're going to use that toolkit and the NuGet package to actually add the identity conversation for us for the Silverlight app. So that's how we'll add the identity to the cloud. Last thing is we're going to take the SQL Azure database, which we've already got, expose it out, add the play game method so that it's got the rules for how that's going to work, and then we'll wire it up to our user interface data. So with that in place, let's go out and take a look at how we build a Windows Phone application. By the way, this is what this thing is going to look like when you play it. So it's going to basically have a simple splash screen that comes out. And if you come out to play the game, first thing it's going to do is check to see if you have a token, and if you don't, it's going to go through the login process. The login process then will present the end user with a collection of different identities that they might want to use. In our case, I've got this set up to use Facebook, Google, Yahoo, or Windows Live ID. So picking one of those or another of those, you can go out and you can log into this. And then once we do log in, see if I can get this to work, and set up my secret password. No. And click on sign in, if I typed in the password correctly, it should go ahead and connect me into my games, where I can then see the games that are out here being played. And then I can see I've got one game that I've created already. If I open that up, it tells me what the current score is. I can throw a rock. It's a tie. Throw another rock. Looks like I'm not doing so well. Should we throw another rock? So in this game, I've got rocks, papers, and scissors, and you can pick and choose which things you're going to do, and it goes out and plays against that service in the cloud. So that is what we're going to build. So let's do that by looking at the pieces. First of all, I'm going to go into my solution where I've got my demo, and I'm going to add a new item to it. The new project is going to be a Silverlight phone application, and we're going to call this our RPA phone. And we'll just add it to the GIDS demo. I'm going to pick the OS for Windows Phone to be 7.1. Say OK. And then once I've done that, now I've got a basic Silverlight design experience where I can go out and I can add stuff to the user experience. I can add pictures and graphs and all kinds of interesting things. One of the things that are worth noting is that you've got on the left-hand side a designer where I can go out and I can type in and I can edit stuff over here. I can also take a look at what's called XAML, which is a markup language for describing user interface. And I can edit the properties over here. So for instance, if I want to go over to my application title, and let's just try to get a little more real estate out of this. I can take my page name and change this to be rock, paper, scissors. I could also take that same thing. I could say edit it in the properties, and I could change the properties window and say this is RPA. Et cetera. And I can then modify and work with the markup for how this page looks. But to add the identity to the rock, paper, scissors, what I've got is a NuGet package, which if you've installed from the extension manager, the NuGet package manager, it will go out and pull in dependencies that it needs to be able to work with identity. And the way the NuGet package works for identity is you go under the tools into the library package manager and open up the package manager console, and this is going to go out and it's going to start up PowerShell for us. And what it will have is a collection of different kinds of commands that we can then go out and execute to update our project. So what I want to do is I'm going to call a command called install package. And I'm going to install the package for phone.identity.access control base page. And what this is going to do is it's going to add not only some dependencies, but it's also going to add some markup for me and some code for working with the identity inside of the phone. So it's going to add a splash page. Well, not a splash page, but it'll add a login page for me. And then I'll have a couple of spots where I can go through and set up how my service is actually going to work. So and we're going to install package phone.identity access control base page. And in here, and see if I typed that in correctly. If I typed it in incorrectly, then it would not work. But where I'm getting this from is from my identity talk. And let's just make sure I get that typed right. So that looks about right. Oh, base page. So this is now, oh, it's already installed. So somewhere, something got added. Oh, you know why? Because I'm in the wrong project, RPA phone. Now, let's do this. So that's just going to mess up my other projects. So one of the things about the package manager and NuGet that you do need to be careful of is that when you go out and open it, it's going to default to the currently loaded project that's the start page. If I had done this correctly, I would have had just that one install of the Identity Access Control base page. Now it includes instructions in here on how to actually go through and use this, which is nice, because if I need that to kind of help me know what I need to do next, it says that I've got a resources file where I can put in the name of my service, and I also have the realm, which is our URI. And then it's got a couple of places where it's going to have navigation happen. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to go into our project and just take a look and see what got added here. So in my RPA phone project, it added a folder with some README content. It added a pages where I've got my page for login page added underneath a folder, which is going to logically organize it. That's kind of nice to know. If I double click on that, that's where I'm going to have the code where I need to navigate to and from the appropriate places when our logic is done. But we also have this thing in here, this resources. And this is where we're going to put in here the namespace for our GIDS control here. So it's GIDS 2012. And that is going to correspond to our namespace for the relying party application. So I just want to make sure that this namespace is the same. So pulling this up, you'll see that GIDS 2012 is located right here. And that is the that is where my namespace lives. And then I'm going to have the URI being the URI for the RPA. So that is going to be right here, URI my RPA. So with that in place, then I need to look at how I'm going to go out and trigger the actual authentication process to happen. Now, in a typical Silverlight phone application, I could do that in a couple different places. One is, if I look at the application manifest file itself, it has a default page that things are going to open up to. And by default, it's opening up to the main page, and I could change that to automatically navigate to my login page and then from there go into somewhere else. But what I'd rather do is I would rather have something in my application trigger that authentication mechanism to work. So in my main page of my application, once I come in there, I want to check to see if there's a simple web token. If there's not, then we're going to load it. So let's go back over here to where we got our main page. We're going to go out to the code, and I'm going to add a couple things. We add some globals here. First thing is I'm going to add a global for simple web token. And this simple web token is going to be the same simple web token that gets added from the login page. And then I'm going to come down in here, and after I do the initialize components, I'm going to do a load data. So basically, check to see if we have a valid token inside of that simple web token. If we don't, then navigate out to that login page. So basically, if the token's not there, go out and get one. Then we're going to come down, and after we've got a valid token, assuming that there is one now loaded up for us, then I'm going to go out and I'm going to call this method to load the data. Now the load data, before I do any messing around with the actual SQL Azure data and the data services, is let's just take a look at what's inside of those claims. So what I've got is just a simple for loop that's going to take the claims, and for each one of the claims, I'm going to iterate through the list of claims. I'm going to pull out the values. And so I'm doing a substring, pulling out the claim name, and then the value, and I'm just going to do a message box showing what those claims look like. So with this put together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my RPA phone, say debug start a new instance, and if we did this correctly, actually, I've got one other piece of work I need to do. This is going to work to go out and do the authentication. It'll take us to the login page. But I need to say, what are we going to do once we have a valid token? So let's stop the debugging, and let's add that logic. So in our actual login page itself, right-click, let's close all but this so we get it kind of cleaned up a little bit, is after we go through, and this is the page that loads and does that login conversation for us, is I'm going to check to see if I've got no errors, then I'm going to navigate myself back to whatever that calling page is, which would be my main page. So in here, I'm going to go out and I'm going to say that if there's no errors, then navigate back. And I'm also going to take this and I'm going to send this down here as well. So when you navigate to it, if I've got if I've got a valid token, then I'm just going to go ahead and navigate back to the calling page. Now the other thing that I'm going to do on my main page is I do want to be able to test my authentication with a couple of different providers. So in our main page itself, we have a little bit of markup so that I've got like the ability to log out of this page as well. So down here, if you look at how the XAML is laid out, I've got this application code down here for the application bar, is I can replace that with a little bit of markup that will actually include that for me. So let's add that. And that is right here. And I've got a click method that is going to be called when you log out. And if I right-click view the code, then the actual logout click, which just got added here, I'm just going to go out and set the simple web token to null if you're sure you want to log out. So we'll do this. And then when you log out, then we're going to re-navigate us out back to the login page. So basically, we're going to keep a very simple chain of how we're coming in and going out. We're going to start with the base page. We'll navigate to the login if we need to. Once we come back, if we log out, we'll just navigate back out. And then when we exit the application, we just close that last page. So take this, and I'm going to say this, say, mark this as my startup project so I can do an F5. Build it, and see if we can get this to work. And so here's our login. And then I can go out, pull up my login. We'll try working with Google. And from Google, I just need to put in some valid credentials. Hopefully I can do this correctly. And let's not say signed in. And it's contacting whatever that text I put into the GIDS login namespace. And then when it gets through, if it's validly logging in, then I'm going to get a message box to pop up and show me all my claims. So now it's connecting to Google to get that token and then sending it up to the access control services. And then when this gets done, then hopefully we'll have a nice log me in kind of an experience. Questions on what we've done so far with this? It's fun when you're just watching the Lance crawl across the screen in front of a live audience, because that's just that much more fun. But realistically, what's happening here is it's actually going through and it's doing that authentication process. It's trying to connect up to Google, and apparently our network is a little bit on the slow side. And hopefully that will now just go ahead and finish. Let's try it with the live ID, just see if that makes any difference. So all the services are running slowly, but looks like we're getting something here. try a password here. And sign me in. So in this case, it still seems to be getting stuck. So let's go through here and stop. So should get us through the navigation of setting this up. Oh, that's why, because I took this, and let's take this code here, actually set it into there. So now, if you take out the navigate out from the valid location, then no, it doesn't finish. So let's do that one more time. And now, what I should be able to do is go into this. There's my splash. Notice it's got my identity information, so it's gone ahead and navigated out of there, and it's putting up the name identity, the identity provider, and any other pieces of information. Now, what I want to do is I want to have in my solution a little bit more with the graphics and other things. But let's take a look. We've got the identity going. Now let's talk about the services. So first of all, the service that I've created, RPA service, has this basic initialized service methods on it. What I want to do is I want to be able to do other things like play games with it. So if you have a web get, which is an OData protocol, I can create different methods and functions. So for instance, if I had one called public, say a list of strings to return back, and then say hello, string of coming in, and I say return new list of strings, and then hello Bangalore. And then say you said plus SN. And if I was to take this and I said say hello, right click on that, view it in the browser, then what I can do is I can take that same say hello method and work with it inside of Windows Azure. And I think that the NuGet thing is somehow affecting. But what I want to do is I want to have a play game method that is going to be actually part of the service, which is going to implement the same kind of a logic of how a game can be played. And so what I'm doing in my play round is I've got a game result, which is basically a history of playing the rock, paper, scissors game. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take in a game ID and a move number, basically a string saying what move you want to play. And I'm going to say, okay, create some results, figure out what the move that they're doing is, and then I'm going to go through and say, here's my valid moves, rock, paper, and scissors. I'm going to create an instance of this game by selecting from the data source, the current data source's list of games in the table, and I'm going to get the next game number, and then I'm going to create a game results record to figure out what round I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a new game result with the game ID, the move, and then I'm going to declare a winner based on whether they do rock, paper, and scissors. I've just got some brute force rules saying who wins in each one of these different scenarios. And then I'm going to save those results, set the winner, add it to the data store for where those results are going to be saved, and then I'm going to commit those changes using the save changes method. Okay, so this is the service that's going to be running up in the cloud. For the Windows Phone, I'm going to add a service reference to be able to connect up to that service and be able to work with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out here to my GIDS ORPA service, say go, And I've built this, and I've actually deployed it before I started in here, just for interest of time, because it takes a little bit of time to get this to build. How much time do we have? About 10 minutes? Okay. So here's my demo DB entities. We're going to call this my service RPA, and we add a reference to this method into my game that's down here being played on Rock, Paper, Azure. Now, inside of this, then I've got my service, and in my main page, when we come into actually loading this up, we're going to do a little bit more than just show a message box. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that identity, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to query that list or that service for all of the games that this player has played. So I'm going to take the markup that's here, and I'm going to add some different markup. So I'm going to do this. I've got some markup in my toolbox that I've got, and I'll just put this on here. And what I've got is first of all, I've got my game sitting up here, and then I've got a list box that's going to contain some bindings, some template binding for how I want each result to look. So I've got a text box, and I've got some static resources that are going to take and specify how I want to place those things. And then I've got a text box for creating a new game where you give me the name of the game that you want to play, and a button that you can click on to actually go out and do that playing of the game. So taking a look at these two things, I've got a couple of methods I'm going to have. One is for when you double-click on the actual selection of a game. I want to be able to navigate out to a new screen to actually play the game. And then I've got the new game method. The other thing I'm going to change is this load data. I'm going to take this stuff right here, and we're going to comment this out. With the Control KC allows me to comment without actually having to delete or type too much. But then I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to add a service. So first of all, at the top of this page, I've got my service RPA, and I've got my demo DB entities. O service is equal to a new instance of where that lives. And this is going to be a new URI, and that's going to be using the name of the service that I want to work with. So in this case, I'm going to actually just create the service here. And in my markup, I created a hidden pane on here, which is going to be where I've collapsed down the visibility of this data URI to be someplace where I could actually put in the text host URI. I'm going to put this in here. Call this gids2012.cloudapp.net. And this is a text box that I've created that is just going to be kind of like when I'm doing my development, I found that I needed to change what my host was when I was going local host, and sometimes the emulator would change port on me. So I created this to kind of give me that opportunity to do that. But the thing is that when I'm in my load data method, where it's going through and doing this, I'm going to create the service to use that name from that text box. So OService is equal to a new instance of that with a new URI, and I'm using my text host URI text field to actually create that URI or that hosted service. Now that I've got my service in my load data down here, I'm going to iterate through and pull back all of the games that the player has gone out and put into their games. So from here, I've got the load data, and this is just going to do a simple link to objects where I'm going out and I'm pulling back from oservice.games, from the viewer of games. I'm going to pull back where the player is equal to a token that's coming in. So I'm using the simple web token, using the claim type of the name of the user. And I'm going to order it by create date. We'll do that descending so you get the most recent games. And then I'm going to select out that game record. And I'm using a data service collection to handle an asynchronous call to take care of getting the data and returning it back into my environment. So we'll use the data service collection to actually pull that back. And then I'm setting my list box item results is equal to that game list. Now that will populate the list box of games. So the next thing I need to do is I need to have selection and navigate to the new game. So both of those, when I do a selection changed, I'm going to go through and using the selector from the clicked item, I'm going to figure out which index it is, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to basically confirm that I actually have a valid selection. If it's equal to -1, I don't have anything, so don't do anything. But if I do, then I'm going to navigate to where the play game is. I'm passing in the game ID and also the host name for where I'm going to be playing around with the data. So I've got that going on. And then in my new game, what new game is going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to get a GUID for the game ID. I'm also going to then go out and I'm going to create an instance of this game, and I'm going to instantiate it with the current date time, pulling in my game ID. The game name is coming from the text box. And then I've got a player is equal to the simple web token of the name. So I've got a particular player that's playing this game. We'll add it to the list of games, and I'm going to call this method to begin to save changes. And then once it gets written up into the service, then we're going to navigate our way over to the play game. So this is going to be down here where it's going out. And then it does the dispatcher, because I need to be on the right thread, go through, pull back the list of result async state, and then navigate to the playgame.xaml with the appropriate stuff. So I need to add that page, which is going to be where the play game is. And we'll just add a new item. And we'll call this playgame.xaml. And again, I have some markup pre-built that I'm going to put into this. And so I'm going to take this markup that's inside the page and replace it with some of my own markup. And I also need to have or add in some resources here. So in my start page here, let's go over to the Solution Explorer. Let's just pin this down for a second. So I have some images that I'm going to drag this folder into my game. And one of the things I need to do is I want to show some graphics. So like these are actual picture buttons, but you just can't see the pictures because I haven't included them in the project yet. But I've got these images for each of the different things, rock, paper, scissors, etc. Let's go out to the properties on that. I'm going to set that up as content. And when I do content, and then I'm going to change this to copy always. And then if I was to go over here and refresh this page, save it, go out to play game. Now I've got the nice little buttons and icons. A couple things I did on these buttons was I found that by doing a picture button, using the tag field would tell me what move I'm currently going to do. So I've got a tag telling me this is rock, and the method it's going to do is play around. I've got paper, play around, and scissors. And so I'm going to pull that tag out to say, okay, well, what's the current move that you're going to do as you go through and play this game? So what we've got here is the rock, paper, scissors, and we're going to wire this up by going into our code. And I've got a couple of things I'm going to do. One is I've got a game ID and a player name that is going to be playing in here. So we'll add the game name and player. So I've got the DemoDB entities, I've got my service game, and then I'm going to come down here to override the actual navigate to page. So when you navigate to this, I'm going to go out and I'm going to load up the game history. So what's happening is I'm going to go out and navigate in here. I'm going to pull out the host and the game ID out of the navigation parameters, the query string that comes in. And then once you get to this, I'm going to go out and I'm going to call this load game history. Do a control period to generate the stub. And then inside of load game history, it's going to go through and it's going to iterate out and collect all the game results for this game. And then it's going to use a data service collection to actually go through and return back the collection of all of the rounds that have been played in that game. And then I'm going to bind out to my item source. And then I'm also going to have a game-loaded load completed actually do a little bit more logic to kind of put the current score and other things. So I'm doing a little bit more work on that. So when the game loaded is completed, I'm going to run this guy, which is going to go out and say, okay, well, here's my game result. For each game result in this list of games, iterate through and count up how many times I won, lost, and tied. And then I've got one more method to add, and that is my play round. And so the play round method goes out, takes a new demo DB entities, and then uses a query to say play game, passing in the parameters I need for playing that OData endpoint. And then it's going to iterate through and call that query and then reload the page when it gets done. So then it goes out and reloads the game history. So if we did this, and I right-click on this and I say debug start a new instance, what we should get is the Windows Phone with identity. Identity gives us the login. So I can log in with my Google identity. Put in my username and my password. And my secret password. And sign in. It should take that identity then and navigate me back to the main page. So hopefully this is just going to go like that. Do we want to allow? Yes. Say go. And now I've allowed Google to pass back my identity. So now I've got games out here. You'll see I've got 2 games in my database. I can create a new game. It works. Click on new game. Go ahead and play paper. We lost paper. Won paper. Tied. So I'm running the board, winning. And as you can see, the idea is that you can go through and you can create a game that is working with the Windows Phone, the identity, SQL Azure, and all of this together takes about an hour and a half or 2 hours to kind of put from end to end if you were to start from scratch. So what did we do? We went out, we built a website, we deployed it out to the cloud, we added the phone Silverlight application and identity. We used the NuGet package because that just made it that much easier. We didn't have to write any code. It added our login page for us. We then updated our service and the SQL Azure to put out our data and allow us to consume that SQL Azure interface, and then we wired up to the Silverlight phone application. So questions? Yeah. So we didn't add identity to the client, but we added the identity conversation to the client. So we are using the cloud identity in the client application. So what we did was we allowed the identity conversation to happen using access control services. Does that answer? Yeah. Yes. Oh, stretching? Okay. Well, thank you very much. If you want more information on this, I've got a version next. Build a bot, so maybe I don't always have just the random bot. Maybe I've got a bunch of different ones you could pick and play. Maybe you upload a bot. I always thought it'd be kind of cool to have better animations. Maybe a designer actually look at my code and make it look good. I mean, this is developer art, which is scary, but it does seem to work. Multiple identity providers per account, notification services. There's just a lot of things that you could do with the next version of this game. If you want more information on this, you want to download the code, you want to be able to look at it after the fact, my website, benkotips.com, has all of this and more. And if you have any other questions, I've got some cards up here. I'll be around all week, so feel free to stop by. And thank you very much.